John, a university student, had never been to this city before. He had met a girl online and their conversations had quickly turned into something more. The girl's photos were captivating, and John had fallen in love with her almost immediately. Although he knew that online images could be deceptive, the prospect of meeting someone who was interested in him was too tempting to pass up. As the long holiday approached, John decided to surprise the girl. He had managed to get her address through casual conversation. She mentioned that she lived off campus in a rented farmhouse on the outskirts of town, which she shared with the owners. As someone who loved cleanliness and quiet, John had always found his dormitory life unbearable. The constant noise, clutter, and disruption made it difficult to study. The thought of a quiet farmhouse seemed idyllic. It was late when John arrived in town and he decided to go straight to the girl's house. It was too late for buses, so he opted for a taxi, thinking the fare to the outskirts would be worth it. At the station, he chose a taxi driven by an elderly man who looked like he had seen better days, but still worked the night shift to make ends meet. As they drove, the old man seemed confused. "Did you say West Hill Village?" he asked. John nodded. "Yes, it's a bit far and isolated." The old man hesitated. "You know, it's not safe to go there at this time of night." John laughed. "Not safe, why not? Is it the crime rate?" The driver's face turned serious. "No, not crime, it's and clean. People say the place is haunted. Many who go there don't come back." John scoffed. "Ghost stories, really?" The driver nodded solemnly. "Young man, some things are best left alone. Ghosts or not, this place isn't right. It's been known to draw people in and they never leave." John felt a chill, but shrugged it off. "I'm here to see a friend. She lives there and I want to surprise her." The old man sighed. "If you're determined, so be it. But I must warn you, strange things happen there." The journey continued in an uneasy silence, the old man's warnings echoing in John's mind. Eventually they reached the outskirts of the city. The night was eerily quiet as they approached the farmhouse. The driver turned to John, his eyes shadowed with concern. "Please reconsider." John shook his head. "Thanks for the ride. Keep the change." He got out and watched the taxi disappear into the night. The farmhouse stood alone, a lone figure in the pale moonlight. Taking a deep breath, John went to the door and knocked. There was no answer. He tried again, this time louder. Suddenly he felt a presence behind him. Turning, he saw a figure in the darkness. It was the girl from the photographs, but her eyes were vacant, her skin deathly pale. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. John's heart pounded. "I wanted to see you." She stepped closer and John saw other figures emerge from the shadows, their faces contorted in silent screams. "Go now," she said, "before it's too late." Fear gripped him and John ran, not looking back. He stumbled through the darkness, the sound of whispers following him. He found the main road and flagged down a passing car, driven by a local, who took him to the nearest hospital. John woke up in a hospital bed, his head bandaged. The doctors told him he had been found unconscious by the side of the road. He never spoke of that night again, returning to his studies with a newfound focus and a deep-seated aversion to late-night taxi rides and online romances. In the dark of night, the old, deserted road stretched out like a forgotten tale. Michael, a 27-year-old office worker from Charleston, South Carolina, never expected his weekend road trip with friends to take a horrifying turn. 2.5 years ago, Michael and his friends decided to embark on a late-night drive to avoid the holiday traffic. They gathered at a small diner for a quick meal before hitting the road. Michael sat by the window, his gaze occasionally drifting to their parked car outside. He couldn't shake the feeling that a woman was standing by the car, her head just barely visible above the vehicle's roof. Each time he looked directly, however, there was nothing there. He dismissed it as a trick of the light or his tired mind playing tricks. As the dinner wrapped up, Michael caught another glimpse of the woman. This time, she seemed to be climbing onto the car, one hand gripping something while the other supported her ascent. He quickly turned his head, but again, she vanished. The friends piled into the car, ready to start their journey. Oddly, the car's GPS voice, usually a male AI, had changed to an eerie female voice. Michael felt a chill but didn't say anything, thinking it was just a system update, as his friend Tom, the car owner, suggested. Taking turns driving, Michael soon dozed off in the passenger seat. He awoke to find the car moving slowly alongside a woman in a black vintage dress pushing a baby carriage. Groggy, he assumed she was just a pedestrian and went back to sleep, not realizing they were on a highway where no one should be walking. After a short nap, he woke up again, this time to a nightmare. The woman with the baby carriage was now in the driver's seat, holding the steering wheel with one hand and the baby in the other, both staring at Michael with unsettling smiles. Paralyzed with fear, Michael couldn't scream or move. Slowly, the woman's face morphed back into Tom's, and Michael regained control of his body. It was 3 a.m., and they had just exited the highway. Swapping seats, Michael took the wheel as Tom slept. Following the GPS, they drove into a remote village and down a narrow dirt road. The path grew darker and more isolated. Suddenly, the woman in the black dress appeared ahead, cradling a baby and waving for them to stop. Michael froze, unsure of what to do. His other friend, Steve, awake in the back seat, suggested they turn back. Michael reversed the car, but the woman kept pace, retreating as they did. The GPS voice repeated in a disturbing tone, "You are off course, you are off course." Finally, with enough space to turn around, Michael sped back to the main road. The eerie voice reverted to the original male AI, and the woman vanished. They drove in silence until dawn, when Tom woke up. Discussing the night's events, Steve revealed he saw nothing unusual, only that Michael had been smiling eerily since entering the village. The story ends here, but the memory of that night lingers, a chilling reminder that sometimes it's not the destination, but the journey, that haunts us. This creepy story comes from my good friend Mike. You know how there are stories on the internet about haunted used cars. I always thought they were just jokes until Mike had a real-life encounter. Mike had wanted to buy a car since March last year because all his friends had them and he was a bit jealous. But due to financial constraints, buying a flashy new car was out of the question. After thinking it over for a while, he finally decided in May to buy a used car from a well-known used car dealer he trusted. The dealer recommended a used Mercedes with only 12,000 miles on the clock. Supposedly it belonged to a very careful woman who rarely used it, so the price was well below market value because she desperately needed the cash. Mike was sold, took out a small loan and quickly signed the paperwork. He was thrilled to drive his new car home. The car was in such good condition, it didn't even look used. Mike loved the car so much that he spent more time with it than with his wife. I had the chance to ride in his car a few times, but each time I couldn't shake a strange feeling. It felt like there was an unseen presence, similar to the feeling you get when someone points at you with your eyes closed. I mentioned this to Mike and suggested that maybe there was something fishy about the car being so cheap. Could it be haunted, like those stories on the internet? Mike just laughed, thinking I was jealous of his great deal. He trusted the dealer too much to think anything could be wrong. Besides, if it had been in an accident, it would have had some problems, but the car ran perfectly. Mike's obsession with his car reached new heights. One night around midnight, after he had showered and gone to bed, he was startled by the car alarm going off. He jumped out of bed, terrified. In the past, he would have cursed the car owner for the noise, but now that he had a car of his own, he was worried that someone might try to steal it. His worrying wasn't unfounded, as there weren't many luxury cars in the car park, making his an easy target. With only an old man at the gate, security was minimal. From his 6th-floor window, Mike could barely make out a figure near his car. Angry and alarmed, Mike ran downstairs, not bothering with shoes or the lift. By the time he got there, the figure had disappeared. He inspected his beloved car but found no signs of tampering or scratches. However, given the thief's position under the car, he decided to check underneath for any missing parts. As he crawled under, he noticed something lodged near the shock absorber, a dried, shriveled lump of flesh. Curious, he pulled it out and found that it was wedged tightly, with a piece of metal sticking through. Once outside, he used his mobile phone light to inspect it further. Covered in mud and grayish-brown in color, it was an eyeball. Horrified, Mike recoiled and immediately called the police. The police investigation confirmed that it was a human eyeball and that the car had indeed been involved in a fatal accident. The dealer hadn't lied entirely. It was a woman's car, but she'd barely driven it because she died shortly after buying it. The car had hit and crushed a pedestrian, leaving her body mangled beyond recognition. The grieving family fought a long legal battle, and the original owner, thinking the car was bad luck, sold it for a song. The dealer had merely changed the exterior and cleaned it up before selling it to Mike. In retrospect, Mike should be grateful for that night, as he might never have discovered the truth otherwise. But the question remains, was it really a thief that night? What do you think? That's the end of today's story. Thanks for your support. If you enjoy our stories, please follow, comment, and share.